Head back towards Exhibition Street, then go south until you reach Bourke Street. Cross the intersection staying on the side of the road closest to Spring Street. The destination is 148 Exhibition Street. Melbourne has always had an area known as Chinatown. As Marcus Clarke wrote in the Argus on the 9th of March 1868, one half of Little Bourke Street is not Melbourne, but China. From humble beginnings in 1855, where only 2 buildings were occupied by Chinese migrants along Bourke Street, between Swanston and Russell, to its height in 1911, where Chinatown was bordered by Latrobe, Spring, Bourke and Swanston Streets, its expansion created a visible enclave in the centre of Melbourne. It was here that most of Victoria's Chinese would enter at some point during their stay, and where visitors to Melbourne considered it another must-see attraction, escorted by police, of course. Propaganda against the Chinese informed the ignorant public of their predilection for sex, drugs, and gambling. The biggest gambling venue was at 84 Little Bourke Street, on the corner of Exhibition Street, which accommodated over 100 players at the gambling tables. Most Chinese took up opium smoking after their arrival in Australia, as solace for lonely men away from their family and friends. Opium dens were usually denounced as squalid places where the caricatured John Chinaman's sexual depredations on drugged European women took place. The reality was somewhat different, with the decor more reminiscent of a shabby British clubroom than a filthy satyr's dungeon. More importantly, the atmosphere was never sexually charged, as opium destroys the smoker's libido. Also, accounts of visitors to Chinatown invariably listed the clientele as European rather than Chinese. In reality, Chinatown was more economically important than people realised. Gambling and opium were the occupations of only a minority of Chinese. According to Graham Davidson, David Dunstan and Chris McConville in Outcasts of Melbourne, among the 8,000 Victorian Chinese in 1891, nearly 900 worked as lodging servants. More than 1,300 still lived from gold mining, and over 200 were grocers or greengrocers. By far the largest number, however, were market gardeners, listed at 2,000. It is among this atmosphere of negative stereotyping that a vicious murder occurred in 1856. Hopefully you are here at 148 to 150 Exhibition Street, where the body of Sophia Lewis was found in her home, her throat slashed from ear to ear by police on the 1st of December 1856. Sophia was a young woman who had migrated from England and began her career as a prostitute here in the colony. She catered to the needs of the Chinese in Melbourne, as they typically treated prostitutes better than the men of Anglo-Saxon descent. They were unattached, in their 20s, literate, polite and inoffensive, and comparatively wealthy. They were also generous. One paid to furnish her house, which was reported by Hugh Buggy, a reporter from the Argus, to have been wallpapered with Chinese wallpaper. Quote, "A riot of green dragons, purple pagodas and vermilion flamingos, and her house was filled with Chinese statuettes and ornaments." End quote. Others gave her nuggets of gold, the gold chains around her neck, and the watch she wore, as well as several rings. The most important of these rings was in the shape of a coiled serpent, and was reported stolen by Sophia's friend Jane Judge. It was by tracing this ring that investigators were able to locate one of the men involved in this heinous crime. A Chinese man had been found in Ballarat wearing a ring that matched the description perfectly. His explanation for having the ring was that he bought it from another Chinese man the previous summer, Chong Sai. Sai had been seen at Lewis's house on the night of the murder in the company of another Chinese man, Hang Zhan. Chong Sai was arrested in Snake Valley near Beechworth on the 26th of July, where he was charged with the murder of Sophia Lewis and remanded in custody. Hang Zhan was arrested just outside of Bendigo the following Saturday after an extensive manhunt. It was reported in the Argus that Zhan had made a full confession to the government interpreter James O'Chong in Bendigo. He stated that he and Ah Ping, at this point a Crown witness, and John Alou, a wealthy merchant and political lobbyist, had been drinking at Sophia Lewis's place that night. Carried away by alcohol, they decided to rob her, and in doing so, murdered her with a knife and razor. Zhan claimed only to be an accomplice, saying that he was waiting outside while Ah Ping and Alou ate supper with her. Later, Alou called him inside and handed him a knife. However, the officer in charge, Charles Hope Nicholson, who 20 years later would be responsible for the hunt for Ned Kelly, did not believe this confession. He was convinced of the guilt of the two men he had nominated for the crime, Hang Zan and Chong Sai. Despite numerous attempts by police to persuade Zan to implicate Sai, the former stuck to his story of being with Alu and Ah Ping, but that he did not enter Lewis's house and had no knowledge of what had been done inside. However, Fook Shing, a one-time cellmate of Zan who had been released from custody on the condition that he appear as a prosecution witness for the case, said on the stand that Zan had confided in him. Fook Shing claimed during the committal hearing that Zan said a man called Chong Sai and he did the murder. When asked by the prosecutor why Zan had lied about Alu and Ah Ping's involvement, Fook Shing said that Zan had said that they had given him trouble in the past. Based on this evidence, Sai and Zan were committed to stand trial for the murder of Sophia Lewis. The two men were convicted of murder despite no evidence of Chong Sai's guilt and sentenced to death. The accused men were representatives of a demonised group in the colony and were now being personally called to account for its supposed depravity. The real case against Chong Sai was that he was a Chinaman, one who knew Sophia Lewis and Hang San. Despite an appeal to the governor on the issues of the trial, the use of the interpreters, and the flimsy evidence against the prisoners, Sir Henry Berkeley declared that the sentence should go ahead. The Premier, William Haynes, was concerned about the executions, so requested to interview the two interpreters. Nicholson was unable to present them, informing the Premier that they had left the city. Nicholson showed the Premier a letter purporting that the convicts had made a full confession to James O'Chong, and the missionary Reverend Young vouched for their integrity. When inquiries were made by the sheriff of the jail as to the existence of these confessions, both prisoners denied ever making them. However, this was not enough for the execution to be delayed, let alone cancelled. The prisoners were executed on Wednesday, September the 2nd, 1857 at Melbourne jail. The man who claimed the largest portion of the reward money offered, that is £100, was Nicholson's Chinese agent Chin, otherwise known as John Alu. This was in addition to the £36 he had already been paid for his spying work. Later, Alu was appointed the first Chinese detective in Melbourne and earned £10 a week.